participants, if our participants have not filled out a W-9 this year, that's the only way you can get the stipend. Miss Tiffany really needs those within a week if you've not done that. I'm going to put in the chat her email address, and then it's a lengthy link, but if you'll copy and paste that link, that will take you straight to a W-9 that you can fill out. And then I put on there what you got to have filled out, and then send it to Tiffany. And so I'm gonna go ahead and stick that in the chat right now. But that should get everybody in good shape on that.
Sounds great.
Because the sooner everybody gets those turned in, the sooner you get your checks.
Absolutely. And we want those, right?
We want everybody to get those.
That's right. All right. Well, today it is 3:30. We're going to go ahead and get started to respect everyone's time. Thank you for joining in for today. Today's workshop is how to incorporate STEM into math classes. And we have Miss Anna Shelton from Peabody High School. And if you know who Ben DeChara is, she is now in Ben's role at Peabody High School as the STEM, do you call it coordinator, Anna? STEM coordinator? Yes. And she's also still in the classroom full time. And so without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to Anna and let her have it. Welcome
awesome.
today.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining with me. Give me just a second as I share my screen real quick. Well, I said that if it's going to let me.
It should. Do you have a little thing at the bottom where it says share?
Yes.
Okay.
But oh,
Is it thinking about it?
yeah.
Sometimes it takes a minute.
There we go. Let's see.
Aha.
There we go. All right. Okay. So just to get started, she kind of introduced me a little bit, but so I now am the active STEM coordinator for the district. So I work alongside not only the high school, but the middle school here at Trenton and the elementary school as well. So when it comes to STEM, I'm really kind of hands-on at all the levels in our district. And so I don't know if maybe we have some teachers here who are elementary, middle, high school. I kind of dabble in a little bit of all of it. So I kind of geared today's presentation towards that. I want it to be something that any grade level could take away from. So not only that, I'm also in the classroom. I teach most of our STEM classes here at the high school, but I'm also a geometry teacher. And so my first 3 years in the classroom, I taught geometry for Peabody High School. I was the only geometry teacher here. Now I took a year off. I did all STEM last year, but I'm back in the geometry classroom this year as well, teaching the honors group. And so right now, I'll go ahead and tell you, I am right there with you as far as I feel the pressure of end of courses coming up. So I am not removed from the classroom. I very much am still practicing a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today. And I do have my email down here as well. If at any point you have any questions, you want access to any resources I use, just feel free to reach out. I would be glad to share anything I have. I'm pretty much an open book. Nothing I have is a secret. And I would love to see more people doing some of the stuff I talk about. So if you feel free to reach out, I'd be more than glad to talk to anybody who's interested. So kind of at the heart of incorporating STEM into math classroom, it really is at its base, project-based learning, not a new concept that anybody's heard of. But I love this quote It talks about every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once you grow up. And so, especially at the elementary school level, we love to have our students do hands-on activities. Elementary math is all about different manipulatives and things like that. But as you get older, you move into middle school and high school, we kind of get away from those things. And so project-based learning allows us to kind of keep that going for students as they get into the higher level maths. And so kind of the reason, I'm going to talk about some data a little bit of why project-based learning is important. It adds ownership to the students for their learning. So they're able to not only learn the material, but they're presenting what they found. They're having to think through the process. And especially as we see the math standards have moved so much from procedural fluency to now conceptual fluency, I think this part is huge. The students, when they do projects, they really have to think throughout the whole process. And so they can't just learn the steps of how to solve a problem. They have to know why they're doing what they're doing. You can focus on open-ended questions. Students are able to research and discover math instead of the lecture and being told what this means. Students can discover why they are what they are. This is some actual data that they've looked at between some AP classes. And so the traditional class of just lecture assignment type thing actually scored lower than an AP class taught with project-based learning. And so the data is there. If you're interested in seeing some more, we've done some things here at Peabody High School where we've kind of incorporated STEM across the board, and we're new to it, so we don't have a ton of data, but we've got enough now that I would love to share with anybody who's interested. We've got some really interesting data from the English classroom of improved test scores by incorporating the project-based learning. So the reason I bring this up, the data is there. It proves this stuff is working. And I know whenever you're dealing with a tested subject, it's hard to integrate new things when you're not sure how that's going to affect it. And so we do have data that it does affect it in a positive manner. Some of the reasons it does, the students are engaged. So I don't know about you, but a lot of times whenever I'm having to do the dirty work of math and stand up at the board and lecture for a period of time, that's when my students are trying to go to sleep. That's when they're not paying attention as much. Whereas whenever we're doing projects, whenever they've got their hands-on activities going, I don't have many people trying to sleep. I've got people actively engaged and they're learning and they're excited about what we're doing. Here's a great aspect. The heavy lifting is done by the students. So whenever my students are working on a project, I leave the day and I'm not nearly as exhausted anymore because my students are doing the heavy lifting. They're still getting as much out of it. They're learning, they're taking ownership of their learning. But I'm getting to facilitate the learning instead of directly incorporating it. Attendance improves. Same thing with tardies. And that was really neat to see happen as I've incorporated this more. I don't know if anybody else has this issue, but for math classes, I have people trying to come in late all the time because they are just dragging their feet to get to class. But on days that we have projects, they are rushing to get there because they want to get access to materials first. And so project-based learning does a really great job of improving that as well. Discipline issues, I could speak on and on about how STEM in our content areas have decreased discipline issues. For now, whenever we are doing projects, it's the first time that students would rather be in my class as opposed to another class. It's hard to get students to want to be in a math classroom, but on days we have projects, they're excited to be there. They want to be there, and they will act better in other people's classes so they don't have to miss out on mine. And I'll be honest, teacher morale has increased. Like I said, on days that I do projects, I'm not nearly as exhausted by the end of the day. It's refreshing to see the kids learning and doing things hands-on. And so there's just a bunch of great qualities that come from the project-based learning aspect of it. But I will be the first one to tell you, and it was mentioned at the beginning, they haven't done a STEM and math lesson yet. And I think probably for good reason, because it seems like such a natural reaction. M is literally stands for math in the word STEM. So we think it'd be the super easy connection to make. But if you are a math teacher, then you know when it comes time for testing, when it comes time to those other things, it is very hard to navigate away from what you have been doing. It's difficult to try new things because you're having to weigh the risk versus the reward. So I'll be the first one to tell you, I think that's why it's so difficult, why we don't see more people doing it. When there's that pressure from the state, it's hard to try new things. So the first reason I think it's hard is the standards themselves. The standards, again, like I said, we're moving away from that procedural fluency to the conceptual fluency, and that is a lot more difficult to teach. So we are having to really dive into those standards. The curriculums that a lot of our school districts are implementing, they don't leave a lot of room for other stuff. I know personally we've adapted a new curriculum, and if I were to go 100% by that curriculum, I wouldn't be done by the time EOC testing rolls around. There's just so much to it. And so if you're in a district where you have to follow that strictly, then it doesn't leave a lot of time for other things. So it kind of ties math teachers' hands. Time itself. I teach geometry, and so I know I barely have enough time to cover all my standards in a semester. Or with a year-long class schedule, that time length. And then I look at Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 standards, and I'm sitting here thinking, how in the world do those teachers do it? Because they have twice as many as I do. And so the amount of time that we have to cover the material, it doesn't leave a lot of room for, doing these projects that last 2 to 3 days. And so I understand the struggle, why this is not more advertised, why it's hard to get math teachers to do the project-based learning. And then you have your administration, who I will be the first to tell you, administration loves to see you do projects until test scores run in and they don't necessarily like them, and projects are the first thing to go. We've got to get back to the curriculum. We've got to get back to these things. So it's almost a fight to have to incorporate STEM sometimes, because while math should naturally lend itself to doing STEM projects, the pressure of math often restricts it. And so I'm going to say all these things, and I want you just to know I understand where it's coming from. So whenever it comes to incorporating some of the things I'm talking about, it does not happen overnight. You cannot just immediately flip your classroom into being 100% projects and things like that. Give yourself some grace. Attempt one and see how it goes. Kind of thing. So I'll be the first one to tell you, the data proves that projects do not hinder test scores at all. If anything, they are helping them out. However, they have to be done correctly. So this is a big one for me, because if you will go to Teachers Pay Teachers, things like that matter, you can find all of these great looking projects for STEM and math. But at the heart of it, we kind of know as teachers, that's not getting my students where they need to be for that end of course test. It's not challenging them enough. It looks great. They're probably going to have fun doing it, but the meat of the math is not there. Or maybe even it is, but if that project takes 4 to 5 days to do, I just don't have time. It's not worth it in the long run. And so how do I make a project count? How do I find projects I can do in my math classroom that are worth it in the long run? And so one thing, they have to be rigorous. So that's kind of my main thing. Any math worth doing, you've got to be able to do right. And so our students need to be challenged whenever they're doing the projects. If we're giving them baby problems and expecting great results, we're not going to get them. We know as those EOCs and TCAP tests come, the problems are hard, and we have to prepare our students for that. And so the projects themselves have to be hard as well. Doing anything less is wasting the precious time we do have in the classroom. We also, whenever we're looking at rigor, we have to make sure we're looking at those instructional focus documents, making sure whenever we do put these projects together, or we're looking for things we can do, that we're not just hitting the level 1s and level 2s of those math standards. We really have to be hitting the level 3s and level 4s to make sure we're getting that conceptual understanding, to make sure the students are getting something out of what we're doing. Again, time is a huge issue. You've got to make sure if you're going to spend 2 to 3 days on a project, it's got to be worth those 2 to 3 days. It has to be more valuable than you standing up there and lecturing for 2 to 3 days or whatever other assignment they would have. So you have to make sure it's worth it. If not, then it's a hindrance. It can be. So it's a really unique balance that you have to accomplish here. And then the last thing kind of here, it has to be on grade level. So that's one of the things I see a lot whenever I look at STEM projects that are posted online or on Teacher Pays Teachers. They're great, but are they really to the grade level that I need them to be? A lot of them, if I'm looking for a geometry project, it's geometry stuff they're doing, but it's probably more of a 7th or 8th grade level, and it's labeled as high school. And so just making sure you're really evaluating the grade level that the projects are. And lastly, one of the biggest things that I have to do if I'm going to do a project, it's going to count, it has to be graded for me. Part of that is I need the students to know this is just important. This is just as important as anything else we do in here. If I'm going to take the time to grade it, I expect you to do the work and I expect you to do it well. This is not just so that we can have fun in class. Yes, this I hopefully will be fun for us, but this is a graded project. I expect good work. Especially I found with my honor students, if it's not graded, they don't care about it nearly as much as they do a test. They think it's a waste of time compared to them, what they think getting ready for a test. And especially in a math classroom, a lot of our students are so used to math. You do a worksheet, you do an assignment, you listen to lecture, and you take a test. And so when you start deviating from those things, sometimes they almost see it as a reward and that it doesn't matter kind of thing, almost like it's a free day. And so I grade everything. I let them know this is still the standard I'm holding them to. And it does kind of help them make that adjustment into project-based learning. So I'm going to share with everybody what I think the best math STEM project is. And so when I was preparing for this, I wanted to make sure that any kind of math teacher could take something away from this, whether it's elementary, middle school, high school, because I will be glad. I do some very specific geometry-based projects that if you want to holler at me later about, I will be glad to share with you. But this concept can be used across the board for any kind of math that you're doing, for really any kind of curriculum area. But I think it does lend itself naturally to math. And it's an excellent resource that I use quite a bit. And that is escape rooms. So I think escape rooms are the perfect way to tie math and STEM together. You still get the rigor of the math, but you can do it in puzzles and critical thinking skills they're actively learning with as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can do that in your classroom, how you can do that in math. So a little bit first, when I say I do a lot of escape rooms, I do a lot of escape rooms. So I've learned through trial and error kind of how to make them worth it. I've had some fails, I've had some other things, but I do want to share a few of them that I've done so far. So this is a Candyland themed escape room that I did. This is actually my classroom right now that I'm sitting in. So this is not what it looks like on a normal day-to-day basis. These are just tablecloths that are hung up. So printed out candies that I've hung up around the wall, things like that. Here's another one that I've done specifically in geometry. So if you kind of look at that bottom picture, you can see some triangles there, directly covering our standards. This was a murder mystery we did where they had to figure out who did it. And really all this was, I hung up some tablecloths and I took some tape and I taped out a man on the floor. And that was the extent of decorations we did. All the puzzles themselves were math problems, things like that. So like I said, both of those that we just looked at were in my classroom. So normal space size that we're most probably all working with. These next two, however, these are in our library. So if you've ever been to Peabody High School, if you've ever kind of heard of us, we're kind of known for our library space. We took our traditional 1970s library a few years back and we have transformed it into our STEM maker space. And so we are very blessed to have this. And so at any point in time, we're able to move furniture out, move things around to kind of free the space up however we need. And so I have made escape rooms in here, and these are much more large scale. So they're spread out. This is something whereas in my classroom, I normally have to break students into groups to do these. Whenever I'm in the library, I can have the entire group of 30 kids in there. And so it allows me to have the space for those kind of things. But you'll see a Monopoly one that I've done here. This other one is a DC Comics one kind of thing. And these next two that we'll see are kind of, as I did more of them, I got some new resources. So we were able to get some black lights and things like that and kind of elevate the rooms a little bit. But so kind of, these are a lot of escape rooms. I do want to make a point. I do escape rooms for a lot of things. So I do them for my geometry classroom. I will do escape rooms for my STEM classes. We also do some community outreach events where I create escape rooms for those. So this is something that I do fairly regularly. So this is not just, I have not done this many escape rooms in 1 year in geometry. You know, like that's not necessarily the reason we're doing this. So I don't want anyone to have that misconception. But these are just a few of the ideas that I've come up with in the past. And then, like I said, it can be adapted for kids of all ages. I was able to work with our elementary school kids. And so these are some of the escape rooms we've done for them as well. And they have just as much success in learning from them as well. A lot of times we think maybe they can be too hard or things like that. The elementary school students excel at it as well. So all grade levels can do these types of things and have tremendous success at it. But so now a little bit about how do I go through the process when I want to make an escape room? How do I go about that? The first one is nothing new. If you're a math teacher, I'm sure this is probably how you start your units anyway. Go ahead and make your unit test. So look at your standards, look at your levels there. Make your unit tests for whatever that's going to look like. Okay. Next, from those tests, I'm going to sort those problems into an easy level, a medium level, and a hard level. The reason I do that is because, like I mentioned, for these kind of projects to be worth it, this rigor has to be there. We're not setting up an escape room. We're not taking that time. We're not wasting an entire day of class for them to do baby work. Like, that's just not worth it, in my opinion. I don't feel like my students are getting anything out of that. They could have done a worksheet at home just as easily and got the same thing out of it. So if I'm doing an escape room, the material is going to be difficult. So when I go out to think of my puzzles, I usually do about 6 puzzles, 6 different clues or things like that in an escape room. I find that when I do an escape room, I usually plan for an hour time period of how long it's going to take. Whenever I set timers, that's how long I give them. And I find, depending on the unit, if I'm asking medium and hard level questions, they usually get through 5 puzzles and then 1 final puzzle to escape the room. So we're looking at 6 different tasks here. So for puzzles 1 through 5, I am using the same concepts that I put on my test for medium and hard level questions. Okay. So no easy problems. There are no give me's in the escape rooms. If they're going to get to the next step, they are going to work for it, kind of concept here. For my final puzzle, how they escape the room, I picked something that is more difficult than anything else I've put on their test. So it is a multi-step, multi-concept. If this is not my first unit, then we're pulling in concepts from the past units that we've done. It's a cumulative review problem kind of thing. And that is how they escape. And so kind of going back to the problems and creating the puzzles, I'm going to flip through back to some slides for a second so I don't give anybody whiplash whenever I move through here kind of quick. Like I said, this one right here was in my geometry class, and you will see down here this first puzzle. That is a puzzle directly from our textbook. All it is, we were looking at triangle congruence, and they had to go through, and I had coded numbers to the different triangle congruence rules. So side angle side might have represented 2, and side might have represented 5. And so I had them a code that they had to work through the problems, and it would give them a 3-digit combination. They use that 3-digit combination to then go unlock a box that has a padlock on it so they can get the next clue. So that's kind of how I use those. I'm not going into any kind of vast storytelling that you will see in some other escape rooms. Now, I do usually have a little printout that sets the scene a little bit for them, but I'm not taking time away from the math. Okay, the math is still the main thing here. I don't have to do circus tricks to make it worth it here. I'm using math problems, but the fact that they're unlocking boxes and using black lights and things like that, it gives it that element of critical thinking that they need. And now for the STEM part, I still do different hidden clues and things like that. They have to think critically and they have to use problem solving here for the STEM part as well. But the key here is still the math. So in this escape room, once they unlock the next box, I believe it had some Polaroid pictures in there that they had to use. There were problems on the back of it, and they solved the problems and put it together like a puzzle piece, and it took them to their next clue. Some of the other puzzles I've done, I will hide math problems in jackets. So you can kind of see at the back of the room there underneath the clock, I've got jackets hung up on a hook. Those are intentional. I had clues hidden in there, had math problems hidden in there that I can find as well. So I'm using the problems just like I would give on a homework assignment or anything like that. And I'm putting them into puzzles so that the students can solve them in a different format. So once you've got your problems, what you want the core of your escape room to be, then I usually go for my theme. This can be really anything. I usually base mine on what the kids are kind of talking about in class that time period. So I've done a Among Us themed escape room before because that's what was really popular a few years back. Really just things that I know the kids are interested in. And when I say pick a theme, a lot of those escape rooms, I understand, look very elaborate. They are not. At any given time, it is mostly just tablecloths hung up. And if you've ever hung up tablecloths in your classroom, it gives it a whole new look. If you ever just want a special day, I recommend it. The kids go crazy anytime they see the glow of a different color coming from my room. So it is not as difficult as it appears. I know I've showed other teachers in my class or in my school the escape rooms I've done, and they act like it is just this incredible feat. And I promise it maybe took me 20 minutes the day before, kind of thing. It looks really cool and the students go crazy, but I promise it's not as much work as it looks. Another great resource that I use, and it does help that I happen to be the STEM teacher as well, but if you've got a STEM teacher at your school, have them build you some props. So a lot of the things that you'll have seen in those escape rooms, if I do have props, they have been built by my STEM program. So I have students building those things in my classes, and then I turn around and use them for geometry. So it's a great resource you can use as well. We had one around Halloween, a spooky themed escape room, and we built a coffin for the escape room, and we hit a puzzle in there. And so it's something, it tied my STEM classes. They got to help out my math classes. And I even had some overlap. Some of them were in my geometry class. And of course, I can't tell them why we're doing it. And so they're just going crazy, wondering why we're building a coffin in STEM and knowing it's going to be there in geometry. So it does add a little bit more ownership to that as well. The kids get to kind of see their work come to life. Like I said, whenever you go to make your clues, so you've picked your theme, now you're going to make your clues. Whatever your theme is, pick something simple. And I always start with what I want my point A to be and where I want to end up. And I just kind of work from there. So like I said, for the murder mystery, I knew a few things I wanted to incorporate were I wanted them to use black lights to find a hidden message. I wanted them, again, to solve the math problems. And then the end goal, I wanted them to be able to figure out who did it. So some of my puzzles, I told you a few of the first ones. A few later on, the students at one point unlocked a box that had some scissors in it. And so then they could go find another box that had zip ties and they could cut through the zip ties. I think from there, I'm trying to remember. From there, I think they unlocked the box that had a bunch of different people who could have been the killer, and they had to go through and solve their math problems to figure out which one it was. And so the theming is still there, the problem solving is still there, but the kids are working through their math as well. So a lot of times whenever I talk about this, and some of the feedback I've got from other teachers at my school is I'm not creative enough to do this. I just don't have that creativity factor. I promise what mine is not much more than just the math problems. You're not recreating anything. Purely by creating the theme, the students think it's special. And so you don't have to do anything super crazy. I think that's important to note, because if we think this is some kind of unimaginable feat, it seems impossible to do. You're still doing math. You're still doing what your content area is, what you're confident in doing. It's just a different format to present it. And then lastly, build your room. So I usually, like I said, it does not take me long, maybe 20 minutes. If you're planning anything that takes more time than that, you've got a little bit more time on your hands than I do. And that's great. I hope they turn out well. Really, all you have to allot for is 20 minutes. That's how much it takes to hang up some tablecloths and set up my props. So keep that in mind as well. But like I said, I've really found the escape rooms themselves, it ties that STEM factor in, but it gives the kids the rigor of math without watering anything down. And so I highly recommend it if you haven't tried. And like I said, I've done several in the past. I'd be happy to share any resources or help anyone out if you don't know where to get started. Like I said, I'll put my email back up at the end. But just truly, it's crazy to see the students who normally it's like pulling teeth to get to do math. Now they're some of the ones trying to figure it out the most. One of the most rewarding things I see, the very first time I did an escape room, I had students kicking themselves for not paying attention for the past 4 or 5 days that I've been teaching, because now they don't know how to do the puzzles. They don't know how to get to the next step. And then the next unit we did, they are all about it because they think we're going to do another escape room. And so they want to make sure that they're able to figure this out whenever it comes time. To get started, I kind of have 2 sections here. To do your first escape room, all you need a few locks. These can be padlocks. These can be locks with keys. Any of these different things will work. And some type of boxes, folders, Tupperware, anything that you can lock up. So I have been, whenever I first made my first escape room, I was not even involved in the STEM program. I was just a 100% geometry teacher. And so I didn't have a ton of resources. I didn't know who to reach out to. And so I went to Walmart, I bought 3 locks, and I took some old Tupperware containers that I had at home. I melted a hole through it so that I could stick a key through or a lock through. And those were my puzzle boxes. So nothing crazy. You're not having to spend a ton of money. Now, these things at the bottom are things that I have since gained that make escape rooms really, really cool. So the first one I would recommend getting, if you can get a hold of some black lights. These are excellent. If you didn't know, bleach glows in black light, and so you can use bleach as invisible ink. And so it just adds this whole new element to the escape rooms when the students find a black light and they can search around the room. Makes for a really cool aspect for that as well. Even if they're finding math problems on the wall, they still love to find them. And you can get those. They have packs of the blacklight flashlights on Amazon, I think for $11. So it's no kind of crazy price tag, and you can use bleach as a invisible ink for that. Orbeez is one that I don't think a lot of people think of, but I love to fill a box with Orbeez and hide a key in there. And when the students unlock the box, they've got to reach their hand in and search for the Orbeez for their next clue. So it's something fun that they don't see coming. And it's, again, something cheap you can do. The tablecloths, I think, really make the space. You don't have to. I've done escape rooms where my classroom looks 0 different from what it did before. And they go just as well. So it depends on kind of what you're interested for. A smoke machine is always fun if you can get a hold of one of those. Glow paint, again, if you have the black lights, is excellent. The space themed room that I showed earlier, all of that stuff was done with black light paint. And then lastly, props. Like I said, if you have an active STEM program, even an active ag program, who could make resources for you, I highly recommend reaching out to them. Again, it gives the students in other classes some ownership that they're adding an element to a class, and it's kind of cool for the other students to realize, hey, so and so made this for our class to use, and so that adds another fun aspect to that as well. But that kind of, again, when I went for this presentation, I knew I could pick out projects that directly relate to geometry, and I could pick out all these different things, but I wanted something that everyone could take something away from. And I really think these escape rooms, it ties the STEM in, but it also lets you do that higher order thinking in your math content area, whatever that may be. And like I said, it can go cross-curricular. So if you want to do this in an English classroom, it'll still work. You'll have to adapt it to your curriculum. But I think these are great. I think it's something that everyone should try at least once. And so I've got one more thing I want to talk about, but before I move on to it, does anyone have any direct questions about escape rooms or anything like that? All right. Well, if not, oh, is that something? No? Okay. I just heard a beep. Oop. So, what are we doing here? There we go. Sorry, my computer was making this weird beeping noise. So the last thing I want to talk about is we've talked about incorporating STEM into math, but a very underutilized category that I think happens is incorporating math into STEM. So I think in general, what we use our STEM classes for, we can really have a major effect on how tested subjects score. And I say that as a teacher who is in a tested subject and who I actively use the STEM classes here to help math, because that's what I know best. If I knew English more, I would be helping our English teachers out, but I happen to know math more. So it's something I try to push in my STEM classes. I talked about earlier the restrictions math teachers kind of have and all the pressure, and we just don't get the leniency of trying some of these crazy fun things because we don't have time. The pressure is too much to try and deviate and do other things when we know this stuff works. And so I think STEM itself is a great avenue to do some of these things, to review math that our regular math teachers don't have time to do. And so kind of what I mean about that is in a STEM class, I think not only should you be doing the engineering projects and should you be doing the experiments and all that stuff, yes, that's great. But whenever we as STEM teachers do it, we have to be using the correct academic language. So if I am talking about some kind of project in my STEM class and we're working with circles, I don't need to just call that the edge of the circle. I need to be referring to it as, let's look at the arc length. Let's look at the sector area here that we're looking at. So using that academic language, even things that are below grade level. So I know personally, I teach geometry. By the time a lot of my kids get into geometry, they still can't solve one-step equations. It's just dumbfounding how that happens sometimes. And so as a geometry teacher, I can't just stop everything and hit everything they're missing. Sometimes it's just kind of grin and bear it. We've got to pick up where we are and move forward. I think in STEM classes, we have the opportunity to pick up some of that material that kids have lost along the way. So I think if you teach a STEM class, we need to be incorporating solving equations, even just simple stuff. Whatever my project is, if my students are missing a variable, let's say we're building something that's in the shape of a triangle, I may tell them I want these two side lengths to be this, but we've got to figure out what that third one is and have them use the Pythagorean theorem and things like that. Have them use some trigonometry. Just little ways that we can pick up some of the work from our EOC teachers. And again, I think it's underutilized. I know a lot of times, like I've had to specifically reach out to some of our other math teachers, some of our English teachers of what can I do in my STEM classes to help you guys out? Because we don't think about it. Whenever I was in the geometry classroom, I wasn't thinking to ask anybody else what they could do to help me. It kind of just feels like we're on an island alone. And so I think our STEM teachers, having that conversation with them, I think a lot of them would be happy because like I said, that's what that letter M in STEM stands for, is math. We should be doing this kind of stuff anyway. But I know for me, if I was not a math certified person, I wouldn't know where to start. And so maybe have some of those conversations with your STEM teachers as well of, hey, this is a topic we're covering, or this is a topic my kids should know, but they don't. Is there any way you can work with them in STEM class about this? Is there a project you can do? I kind of mentioned earlier that there's a lot of projects on Teachers Pay Teachers and stuff like that look fun and are awesome, but the meat of it doesn't get as far as we need it to. I think STEM is a great time to do some of those projects. So the other day, I have a lot of the kids in my STEM 2 class that I have in geometry. And so I took a project that I had seen on Teachers Pay Teachers. It looked like a lot of fun. But I'll be honest, I don't think it covered as much as I needed to in a class period. I knew it was going to take a full day of my class, and this close to EOC testing. I knew I didn't have time to waste a day. I didn't think it was going to be worth the reward. And so instead, I take that project and we do it in my STEM class instead. It was a project about calculating different blood splatters. If there's someone gets murdered and there's a blood splatter, how you can use trigonometry to find the angle of which it happened and where the shooter would have been, kind of thing. And so it's a really neat project, but in geometry, I didn't have time to do all the background work that needed to be done. I didn't have time to talk about the actual topics there that were happening, but in STEM I could. And so it covered the material I needed it to, but I did it in a different avenue where I didn't take any time away from geometry itself. Another way I think STEM teachers need to be incorporating math is whenever we do anything, whenever we're about to build anything, I think we need blueprints of everything we're building. That way our students are getting the active hands-on measuring and calculating values, kind of thing. And the last one, which I think if we've seen the standard changes in math, we know everything's kind of moving towards it. Heck, I think in geometry, I've got 5 or 6 new standards that are all based on statistics. STEM is an excellent place to start getting a background knowledge of data collection in our students. So everything we're doing project-wise, we can collect the data from it and we can start analyzing it. We can start plotting the data and be able to read the graphs on it. And these are all things that we have more leniency in STEM to do. So in geometry, I can't spend 2 weeks talking about a really cool project because the semester doesn't lend itself to it. I've got 1 billion standards I've got to cover. I've got to do it quickly. But when I partner with STEM in those STEM classes, they do have time. We can incorporate that and we can really buy ourselves some more time there as well. And like I said, I don't think it should just be done in math. I think a lot more teachers should be using their STEM teachers for this way. STEM can be underutilized in that matter, as far as giving our EOC teachers a little assistance there. And so it's something that we're trying here at Peabody High School, and I'm hoping it has a good effect. But I don't know if I'm just talking to math teachers or I'm talking to STEM teachers as well. So I thought that was a good thing to add here is it can happen both ways. It's not just the math teacher's responsibility to incorporate STEM, it's the STEM teacher's job to incorporate math as well. But yeah, that's all I really had. Does anybody have any questions?
You can also put your question in the chat. Anna, while we're waiting to see if anyone has a question in the chat, you mentioned that you didn't know what teachers were on here. We have 28 teachers from 15 schools and 6 districts teaching all subjects and all grades. So you're hitting a little bit of everybody here. So I think that's really good to see that we've got a broad range of interests in how we can incorporate math into our STEM courses. Also, just to let everyone know, I said we have 6 districts, 15 schools, and 28 teachers represented today, and that impacts about 3,439 students in our region. So that's a huge impact. And just to know that we have that much interest in how we can help our students be more interested in STEM is cool. No questions? Go ahead, Anna.
Well, just like I said, I think part of the interest is, like I said, truly, it seems like it should be so intuitive of incorporating math into STEM and STEM into math, but it's harder than we think. And so I think it's good to understand the pressure is felt, and we understand we're not asking anybody to completely change what they're doing in math. We know you've got to work on those EOC things. We know that is just as important. But I really do believe, I don't say this as anything else. I hardly ever bring it up. I taught geometry for 3 years, And this is what I did. I was fresh out of college. I didn't know anything else. And so it's just by chance I knew how to do projects. And I'm a level 5 math teacher. These things really do work. I'll be the first one to tell you we've adapted a new curriculum, and I don't like it. Okay. Because I feel like it ties me down. I don't feel like I can do these things that I have seen make a difference for my kids. I have seen the importance of doing the project-based learning. And so I know how scary it is. Because here I am a level 5 teacher, and I still feel the pressure now that we have new curriculum to change how I've been teaching to fit that. And I promise you, what STEM does in the classroom makes a difference. The test results speak for themselves. And so I know the fear that happens in that when changing, and if there's any kind of reassurance I can give on that, I promise you it's worth it if you make the projects themselves the rigorous things that I'm kind of referring to here.
You also mentioned something that a lot of other presenters have mentioned is that, don't try to go and do it all at once. Try a project, try 2 projects, incorporate them where you can, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do a project all the time. Just try to incorporate them as your time and your standards allow. And I think that's really important. We don't need to all go in and say, all right, we're doing everything project based, because we can't. It's not feasible, but it's a good place to start with just thinking about how can I do one thing and then work out from there. And then of course collaborate and reach out to other people in other schools who might have some really good ideas, like the escape room. Shannon Smith put on the chat, she's like, thank you. I love the ideas for the escape room for older students. I teach KA in STEAM. So
I'll even say this. I don't know what everybody else's testing schedule is like. We're getting ready next week to start ours. We'll have about 2 to 3 weeks afterwards, though, after testing. That's a great time if you want to try something new to fill that time with. Once the pressure of EOCs are over, see what it's like. See how your students react. So those 2 to 3 weeks after testing's over, I know those times get crazy as well with different kind of field days, activities, things like that. But it's worth giving it a shot. And I think that's a great time to incorporate that.
Anna, I love what you said about the blueprints. I teach STEM, and I have a maker space, and I have all kinds of recycled junk stuff, donations, goodies, whatever you want to call it. And I make my students fill out a build form. It's just one that I created, but it's a piece of paper where they have to list their consumable supplies, their non-consumable supplies. They have to give actual measurements of what their finished product will be. And they have to, draw it out. And I tell them, you don't have to be a great artist. If you can't draw, if you don't think you can draw well, then put an arrow and write what it is that you're using. But we have incorporated so much measurement in our STEM class, and I can really tell it's made such a difference, because some days I'll say all of our measurements must be in metric. And then other days I say it has to be standard. And, I don't let, whichever one you go with, you can't go back and forth. And I think they're so much better at estimating lengths now than they ever dreamed they could be.
Yep. And I'll say that's a new standard they've added in geometry now is estimation and different things like that. So it's right there. It's across all levels.
okay, any more comments or questions from anyone today? Anna, thank you so much for joining and teaching this this lesson on how we can incorporate math into our STEM classes, or STEM into our math classes, and giving us some great ideas. I will let everybody know that you will get a follow-up email from me, and that follow-up email will contain a link to our Facebook page. It'll have a link to our YouTube page. We are trying to get all of our recent videos uploaded to that so that you can go back and review those on your own. I will also put the link that Miss Leanne shared at the beginning of the meeting today for filling out your I-9, so you can get that stipend on there as well. You, in a couple weeks, I usually would say about a week, but workforce development is behind. You will get a certificate, and that certificate for your professional development will come via email by me. Once I get those from workforce development, I'll send those out. I will also include any resources. So Anna, if you wanted to share your PowerPoint or your resources today, I can include that link as well so that teachers can go back and look at that. Last thing I do want to tell you is that upcoming on May 6th, we have a regional STEM meeting. It's going to be virtual, same format, same meeting link. It's always the same meeting link. And we will have guest speakers from our wildlife refuges that are nearby. We'll have John Howe and Tara Dowdy, and they're going to talk about some of the resources that they offer to teachers or classes with field trips and upcoming things that they have planned for the summer. And I'll send out a link for that soon. And then we're also working on some on-ground in-person trainings at the end of May. So we're looking at 2 dates at the end of May. And once that information has been finalized, we'll send out that information as well. Any questions? Any last comments?
Shauna, you might also mention that you'll send out the survey link.
Yes,
because we need
thank
that
you
for
so
our
much.
funding.
Yep, I got to send that on the last email as well. Thank you so much. So a survey link, yes, I'll send that out as well. That is a way that we are held accountable to our grant and grant funding. All the resources that are provided to teachers through the STEM Hub are free of charge, and it's all covered through grant money that we get from TSIN, the Tennessee STEM Innovation Network, and Battelle Education. So I'll send out that link as well. So there's going to be lots of little bullet points in the follow-up email, and you'll get that within the next couple of days. So
Also, if you guys will save the date on your calendar, we've got 2 more of these virtual workshops that we have planned for April for the last 2 Mondays. The 22nd of April will be one on physical science and ways to incorporate that. And then on April the 29th, we're planning to do one about safety tests because that's such an important part of CTE. So we'll be talking about how do you develop your safety test for STEM, for computer science, for whatever kind of CTE programs that you might teach. So we'll have some good information for you for those, because that was something at our last regional meeting we were asked about. People said we really need more information on that. So we've got that planned for April the 29th.
all right. Thank you so much. So we have lots going on, lots being planned, and we'll send out all that information over the next few weeks. So don't mean to be clogging up your email, but sorry, not sorry. We want to make sure we get those resources and meeting information links out to you guys. And I will just say that we've had several comments in the chat. So Sonia's like, I can't wait to try the escape room. Natalie's like, I tried an escape room before, but I like changing it to some of the things you mentioned. Pam Pettyjohn said, yes, I love the idea of the escape room. I'm going to look for more ideas that will work for younger students. This is exciting. Sherry Hatchell's like, thanks for the ideas with the escape room. I would like to try a measurement or telling time theme with my 2nd graders. I would love to hear from others who teach lower grades for ideas. And then we've got several just thank yous. Can't wait for the next sessions. So if anyone has any great ideas for Sherry, when I send out the email, everybody will have everybody's email address in that. So you could just do a reply all and or reply directly to Sherry and tell them if you have any good ideas for escape rooms with measurement or telling time for second graders. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I really appreciate it. This is the biggest or most well-attended event that we've had so far. So Anna, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thank y'all.
Y'all have a great day.